Game 2, Wednesday night, Celtics Nets, and we're doing another crossover episode with the Locked On Nets podcast. What are the adjustments? How are they feeling? How confident are they in stealing Game 2 from the Boston Celtics? It's all coming up right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Be ever ready. Recognize the city of champs. Boston, baby, we do what you can't. Locked on number 18, Tatum and Brown, J-team, step back. We gon' wet that and slay teams. Of course, the Celtics, who else could it be? Screaming like KG with the Larry O.B. Karalis above average, assessing the team status. Best daily pod, no cap, salary matching. Clutch like Bird the DJ, keep John on replay. Prime time, dapping up the truth on the sideline. Raining J's, how it started, raising banners, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. B.
Hey there, thank you for making Locked On Celtics your first listen every day and part of your daily routine Monday through Friday. I'm here for you to give you a fresh, free podcast that exists everywhere podcasts are downloaded, uploaded, whatever it is. Take the show with you on your way to work, download it, put it on your phone, connect it to your car. Now you have sports talk radio that makes sense with you rather than dialing up some of these other guys that barely watch the games. So I'm John Karalis. I cover the Celtics for Boston Sports Journal. I've written a book called Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars, and I was one of the media voters on the 75th anniversary team. And today, Adam Armbrecht and I have a great conversation about Celtics, Nets, and we go back to Game 1, kind of some of our reactions to Game 1. Game 2, the adjustments, that's going to be in the second segment. Some of the Kyrie stuff. How to stop Kyrie or make life a little bit more difficult on him, what he expects if they have this type of game again. How does he feel about the Nets' chances? How do I feel about the Celtics' chances? So let's kick it off right now. It's me and Adam Armbrecht from the Locked On Nets podcast. All right, let's get this crossover episode going. The video portion, I really highly recommend the YouTube version of this because Adam Armbrecht from the Locked On Nets podcast is joining us from inside a nuclear meltdown where he's like glowing nice and green. That's a good plutonium glow you've got going on there.
This is normal. This is where I am. Nothing suspicious happening here. You should feel very comfortable about the environment that I'm coming to you from right now.
Not a problem. Game 1 clearly killed you. You are now a Force ghost standing next to Yoda and Ben Kenobi. That's okay. You're still one with the Force. Kyrie talked about the dark side. You're there. You know, you've now. What is the Force like?
It's powerful, but it also feels like it's killing you. I think that there was a bit of a misrepresentation in those films. I think it was actually just plutonium, and it's cancerous, and we're not doing well. We're going to need some treatment later on, depending on how the series goes.
So, oh man, I love you guys so much. Between you and Doug with the golf thing, this has just been a glorious 2 days of podcasting. So, all right, so Celtics steal Game 1. My first question for you is do you feel like Brooklyn just did enough to win that game, and it's just a good KD shooting game away from Brooklyn has this? You feel good?
Yeah. Well, it's a little broad stroke. Do I think that if Kevin Durant just had a typical game that he usually does, would Brooklyn have been in a position to win? 100%. Now, does it change the fact that you can look at Andre Drummond? I'm sure we'll get into, right? Supporting cast. Bruce Brown came in with the bulletin board material, had a subpar performance. Seth Curry fades over the course of this game. So I think it would be a little bit disingenuous to say Kevin Durant goes for 30, 35. Everything works out great. It was a really big game from Kyrie. You still need some of these other things to happen, but I obviously do think that the success off of Kevin Durant can be found with the supporting cast here if they clean up some things that didn't go so well. But a 1-point loss in the opening game of a series where, Boston is as well-oiled of a machine on both ends of the floor, incredibly well coached. They have the rhythm with one another. By the end of our post-game podcast, Doug and I both said, there's not a real reason to panic coming out of this game. You just need a couple of things to go the way you would anticipate at the start of this series.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Celtics did a great job on Durant. They really harassed him. They
Yep.
made things tough. They came in. They said we're going to make things tough on Durant. I think he got frustrated a little bit early. He turned the ball over a bunch. They had a great plan for him. It worked as well as you possibly could have hoped. 6 turnovers. A lot of those came early. But at the same time, on the Boston side of things, you force a bunch of those early turnovers from Durant, and it's still a tie game at halftime. You struggled. My biggest thing from coming out of that first game is they figured something out in the third quarter where they were able to go on a run. And I felt like the third quarter was more indicative of they've calmed down, they're executing a little bit better, they're starting to build a lead, they're starting to defend, and this is the team that I was looking for. And the one thing about, if only they just did this one thing better, it's that beginning of the fourth quarter for me.
Yeah.
If only the Celtics just treated the Nets like every other team, why couldn't they do what the Indiana freaking Pacers did to the Nets in the non-Durant minutes, or the Cleveland Cavaliers did to the Nets in the non-Durant minutes? Those are the minutes you should win. To lose those by 15 in the fourth quarter that blows my mind. I think the Celtics, I don't want to say they relaxed because that doesn't capture what they did. They got too, I think, caught up in we're right there.
Mhm.
And they made a bunch of mistakes, and they let Kyrie start getting crazy. And then Kyrie's going up against the crowd and feeding off of the crowd, which I really feel like he did. I feel like he let it looks like the crowd might have gotten to him, but no, he's actually like playing into it, and the middle fingers were actual and figurative during that quarter.
Both symbolic and literal gestures were made
Yes.
in that basketball game. The quick thing on Kevin Durant and the early turnovers is something we talked about and got on him in a couple of post games down the stretch of the season was he's been a little careless with the basketball. And that was really the biggest part coming into this game. I mean, listen, Boston did a lot of things. That physicality, that's something that Kevin Durant has to overcome. And again, how things play off of him can help with that, certainly. But he's been lackadaisical at times with the basketball. While the pressure was there from Boston, I'd say half of those turnovers were just carelessness from Kevin Durant. It wasn't about necessarily the swarming defense that disrupted him. He makes some lazy plays sometimes in that regard. And that was the biggest thing we took away was he just didn't look fully, checked in, ready to go. And to your point, when you come out of it, first of all, you go to halftime tied, then you have that lead get built up on you by Boston. And maybe this is another kind of, say silver lining, however you want to look at it. You only, if you're Boston, really had to worry about what Kyrie Irving was capable of doing to you in this one. And with Kevin Durant on the bench, Brooklyn was able to come back in that game, which I think is another. And again, without Seth Curry performing at a high level, without Bruce Brown giving you anything at all. Now, they had key contributions from Goran Dragic off the bench. Obviously, Claxton had a nice game for them. But I've got far more negatives out of this game from a performance standpoint on the Nets side. And yet, there you are. One bad offensive sequence for the Brooklyn Nets when they're up one, and then one good offensive sequence on the other end for Boston. You lose the game. So this is that piece where, and I'm actually curious about your thoughts of, didn't you essentially get everything that you anticipated? I mean, Tatum can go for more than 31. That's not debatable. We know how good he can be. But when I looked inside that box score and saw 20 from Horford, who had an absolutely excellent game, and he can duplicate that against this matchup. But 20 from Smart, 23 from Jaylen Brown, who struggled early but came on late. Like, I see a lot of, hey, we did all of the right things here, and it was a last second flyby from Bruce Brown. Again, Kevin Durant not paying attention to where Jayson Tatum was, probably could have reached his hand out and taken that pass away, going across into the lane for the layup from having lost the series opener at home.
Yeah. Well, I feel like Tatum played pretty well, but there's certainly more from him. There's certainly more from Jaylen Brown that they
Yeah,
can
you
get. I
think.
think they got a great fourth quarter out of him, but he made some mistakes. He was responsible for some of the early defensive errors as well. My grand takeaway from this game is the Celtics, for all of the steals that they made in the early going, they still didn't play the best defense overall. As far as they let Kyrie get going,
Yeah.
and look, Kyrie has a strong chance of getting going at any point during the game. Dropping off as far as they did in that drop coverage by Daniel Tice. Like Daniel Tice, I did a whole breakdown of him just because his defense was absolutely god awful. They need to, if they tighten that up, then they, I think, have a better chance of building on a lead. Like part of the reason why they didn't have a first half lead was because they let Dragic go. They let, Curry got going early. They did let these ancillary players go, and good for them for slowing down KD, but it's almost like they forgot the back end of it. They're so worried about KD that they're like, oh good, all right, we got KD bottled up. It's like, oh crap, there's Dragic who hasn't been playing particularly well, and now I'm afraid of him starting to like get a rhythm, get going, and now you have to worry about him a little bit more. The Celtics need to finish off their defensive plays. I come out of this game feeling still confident that the Celtics probably played 70% of the basketball game that I thought that they would. There's a 30% part of that I think they can improve and start to that 15-point lead that they built is more indicative of how I think they can be in this series. But I'm sure you say the same thing, that there's that 30% of getting KD going and getting some of these other guys going and making some adjustments that, hey, if we do that, then we're winning this by 5 or 10.
Yeah, and I listen. I mean, the Nets have been known to come out in the third quarters and be sluggish, and we talked about it down the stretch when you're playing bad teams like the Rockets and the Pacers, and even the Cavs. Not a bad team, but we understand where they were without Jared Allen. You looked at it and you said, yeah, like you can afford, quote unquote, to give up big leads like this against bad teams because you feel comfortable getting back over top of them. But a team like Boston, it's hard to get down and then work your way back. The silver linings, I guess, from a high level perspective, are Boston scored 19 points in the fourth quarter. That has nothing to do with what they're doing defensively on the Brooklyn Nets and everything to do with what Brooklyn is capable of, I think, defensively. The weird part about it is they don't always lock into that process from the first tip. Now, there's certain players, Andre Drummond and personnel, that just aren't going to give that to you. But I look at that piece of it, the second half of this game, and say uneven, really, third quarter, fourth quarter, going both ways. And I just think if they play a more balanced game, and probably the biggest piece of this, you need Kevin Durant to go off. He needs to get into his bag. But the other thing that he did really well over the last 2 months after the James Harden trade, 7.5 and 8.5 assists. Fans of the show are going to know we talked about this before. He has to look to get these shots to the players around him, and those guys need to reward him with some knockdowns. The way that you get that pressuring defense, that double blitzing looks, all of that physical play that Boston wants to bring at you, is to have some of these looks go down from the outside. Now, whether or not you want to live and die by that, if you're Boston, I can understand the logic, but at some point, Seth Curry is more than capable of punishing you from the perimeter. Bruce Brown has at least shown that he's capable of doing that. And you mentioned Dragic. I think that's a veteran player that stepped right onto the court and said, yeah, I've been here before. I've been in these circumstances. I'm ready to walk right out there and give a bit of a steadying hand, specifically on the offensive end. So, yeah, I mean, listen, percentages, 60%. There's a lot of untapped quality basketball. When you talk about the performance from Kevin Durant specifically, that accounts for 30% of the team, let alone some of these other players. So, but it sets up for a good one, man. I think it sets up for what we expected, a really good series between these teams.
All right, let's talk adjustments in just a minute. Let's start though by putting on our Shady Rays sunglasses, which are, yes, I haven't gotten my Shady Rays yet, but I can mime them because I know that this is a great company that features that gives us all the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. So you get your polarized lenses, you got your well-constructed durable frames, high-end finishes, and the best part here, the insane protection program, which you do not get with the more expensive brands. That includes lost and broken protection on every pair, which I just can't believe. If you lose them, no matter what, no matter if you've thrown them in a fit of anger or passion when Jayson Tatum lays in that last second shot, they at Shady Rays will replace them. And on top of it, they will give 10 meals to fight hunger in America, which is a lot of, that's great. You want those companies that are going to do great things like that. Exclusively for our listeners, both on Locked On Nets and Locked On Celtics. If you use the code Locked On at ShadyRays.com, you're going to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's code Locked On for their best deal of the season, 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses. And that's backed by over 150 verified, 150,000 verified 5-star reviews. Not bad. Get your Shady Rays, be walking around Brooklyn for games 3 and 4, which I will be doing. But let's.
I'm verified by 150,000 reviews.
Yeah,
just me as a person.
As a
walking
person
around. Yeah, you see it over top of my head. It just says, "Ooh, verified." 150,000 people say this guy's all right.
You're a
There's an enormous number that have even a lot of negative reviews, but we don't get into the details there.
Right. You just that they're reviews. That's like the that's whenever you hear the whatever that thing is that Frank Thomas pitches, those testosterone type
yes.
pills, like clinically researched to deliver, like clinically wait a minute, you didn't say that you actually found anything. You just said that you researched them.
Proven?
We're clinically researching this.
We're looking into it.
Just like we're clinically researching adjustments for game 2. Don't know if it's going to work, but clinically speaking, sure, we'll go for it. What can you possibly give to Andre Drummond to make him good?
Yeah, skinnier, stronger, fitter pills. I mean, listen, I refer to him as a sack full of pudding that we love, and we love the game that he brings, right? But by the way, you go back to the regular season matchups, he struggled in those as well. This is not a good matchup for him. You have to know that physical, more athletic. You're going to get caught out on some of these switches when you see him trying to defend Jayson Tatum on the perimeter. That's not something you're excited about if you're a Brooklyn Nets fan. I think that it does come down to, and we said this before, the reason why Claxton and Drummond are being used here at the 5 as opposed to a LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin to a lesser extent, is because they can get out and run at pace, right? They can move with this pace of play. And if you get out in transition and Kevin Durant is facilitating a bit more, some of those easy baskets going towards the rim can come for Drummond. And that's where you can make the impact offensively. The stagnation that you started to see from him on that end of the floor. And I know this is as much as about the defensive side of things, but if he can be effective offensively first, it's about dictating tempo. A lot of whistles in that first game. We went both ways. There's no reason to scoff on either side of it, but he's one of the guys that needs to play physical with his matchups on the offensive end to put Boston into some foul trouble when they don't have Time Lord back yet. But we want Tice off the court. We want Horford maybe having some issues there. But unfortunately, you have to live with these results. He needs to play smarter defensive basketball. He needs to know that they're going to attack downhill at him. And you have to, Kevin Durant said this in a post game going back to the regular season, careless penalties, knowing that you've been beat going to the basket. And rather than just trying to keep your position and affect the shot, you go with one of those careless chop downs with your hand. You take those early fouls, you get yourself off the court. As much as anything, you need Drummond to be a rebounder and an innings eater over the course of these games. And he took himself completely out of that role. I know, Nets fans are calling for LaMarcus Aldridge. I think that he comes with obviously offensive upside, but then a really big detriment on the defensive end in matchups. So he just has to play smarter basketball. It's really as simple as that. And I don't think there's a lot of big changes to make shy of staying grounded and playing smart and not allowing the physical 1, 2, 3 different layers that Boston can throw at him to lead to early fouls. It can't stay out of foul trouble. If you're on the court, you can still do something, right? Like leaving Nicholas Claxton out there by himself to try to rebound and having anyone else try to do the gang rebounding against Boston is a very tall order. And we saw how that affected them in the first game.
See, I feel like this is where the Celtics can really win the game. And look, Al Horford was so great. Al Horford was great. There was that one play I thought it was hilarious to watch. So Jayson Tatum just completely takes the ball away from Bruce Brown and goes the other way. And Horford is basically he's below the free throw line, and he gets to past half court before Andre Drummond even flinches.
Yeah.
Like Drummond just stands there, watches the steal go, and then watches his guy go past them and doesn't even feign interest in getting down to the other end. These are the playoffs, man. You're supposed to sell out. You're supposed to go like balls to the wall, get down to the other end just in case. Okay, so you're Bruce Brown. You're like, damn, I just turned the ball over. I got to really lock down here. And maybe you get to force a miss He doesn't even get to that point because Al Horford's, hey, I'm wide open. Alley-oop, it's a dunk. Those points are like when you lose by 1, you can go back and say,
Yeah.
2 points there, 2 points here, 2 points there. Those are the spots where you really got to sell out. Now, you're right. Like Claxton, if they play Claxton more, I think every time he's on the floor, he's really going to sell out for
Yeah.
block shots. You know what I mean? And so if I even tweeted it out, I will donate $100 for every up fake that gets Claxton off the floor for the Celtics, because that's the way to play this game. Get him up off the floor and you just dump it off to his guy, or just get the foul. I don't see how Brooklyn plays that 5 spot. And if the Celtics adjust to that, then you could play both of those guys off the floor.
Yeah, Claxton. I mean, Claxton has been playing smarter defensive basketball. We saw this down the stretch against the Philadelphia 76ers. He had to take on Joel Embiid, and he's made the adjustment in his career. Still a very young player, but been around a long time. He sagged back in the lane on him. He worked with the quick hands. He wasn't going to try to body up against a more physical player. So I don't worry about him getting caught in the air necessarily. Now it comes over on the help defenses, and you're talking about some of the drives from Boston. He wants to get there. He wants to help make that play. So he has to keep an eye on that. This is where the question comes. Talked about Kevin Durant at the 5, which is like the death lineup that the Nets theoretically in some series want to get to. But this is the hard one because you see how much you sacrifice there. I'll be interested to see. Again, people call for Aldridge. I think Blake Griffin might even be the smarter move here for Brooklyn, because defensively he can get to his spot, right? I think he still led the league in taking charges, even though he didn't play at all down the remainder of the season. So he's probably a guy that from a defensive perspective, in tandem with Kevin Durant, or you're not gonna be able to really play. It's hard to play these guys together. And the funny thing is that Nash had said, like, we value Blake Griffin at the 5. That's where his minutes are going to come from. So if that's the case, the only thing you can think is you're going to reduce some of what you're getting from Drummond and then go with a smaller version and a player that certainly has shown he's capable of being smart offensive end, setting those screens. It opens up a whole other can of worms. I can make the case that even though Blake struggled with it, he obviously is a better shooter from the field than Drummond. There's an element there, right? Try to get more spacing on the floor and help yourself out a little bit there, and then see what can come on the defensive end. He's still going to get caught in some bad switches against a lot of those matchups there, but you'll live with those results. I'll take at some point saying, how many bodies can I utilize to collect how many fouls just to frustrate Boston in some possessions and force them to the line to have to knock down some free throws, something that Blake's a little bit better than Drummond. And then again, I can't commit to this LaMarcus Aldridge thing because it feels like a panic push. If you're going to say one game into this series, knowing exactly where the areas of concern we're going to be, we're going to completely flip this script. It's again, the adjustments are the adjustments are have Kevin Durant be Kevin Durant. Like, and then all these other things, the Drummond issues are the Drummond issues. Drummond's not going to play a different type of game, but he can be more effective. He can get some offensive rebounds. He can get you some second chance opportunities. And that's where I was shot by double digits in this game. So that's where I think it is. It's in the margins a little bit. And to your point, it's fair to say the hustle plays, those little things are what really matter for Brooklyn. And there's some other areas here where I think the health of Boston overall is how they're able to win in those margins over some of the issues that the Nets are still struggling from in a number of key spots.
Man, I joked about it the other day. If they put LaMarcus Aldridge on the floor, man,
You're just asking for it.
I think Ime would just do backflips on like that. That would just be. But hey, I mean,
no, but and fans call for it because they think about the offensive side, right? Because he can shoot. So you go, oh well, he's a mid-range shooter, and there's an impact he can have there.
Sure,
but the net negative defensively of what is going to happen there, it's so funny. It's a spectrum, but it's this exact same mentality I would think from Ime Udoka and the Celtics. If you go, when Patty Mills comes on the court, that's the switching matchup we want to get to. When Aldridge comes on the court, that's the switching matchup we want to get to. And I think you need to mitigate how easy it is to identify the weakest component on the court for Brooklyn. And that is one of those players. Drummond's going to struggle in some areas defensively. He's also going to be good in other ones. And it's the quickness thing. It feels so disheartening to be talking poorly of LaMarcus Aldridge. He's a phenomenal player. He's had a phenomenal career. But this is a death nail kind of matchup for him if you put him out there and you can give him 14 points on the offensive end. It's not going to matter.
Yeah, We'll see. We'll see what Brooklyn does there, because that's something to certainly watch for. Like I said, from Boston, really the main adjustment is how do you play Kyrie? And that was one of the things at practice on Tuesday where they talked about, like, Kyrie got away from us, is what Ime said. You know, he got away from
He got away from us a little bit.
yeah. So 39 points on 12 of 20 shooting is definitely getting away from you. And even as much as that, it's the assists, the six assists, giving him 4 steals, and that was. But at first, I'm very curious to see what they do with Daniel Tice, and how far down are you going to still play drop coverage, or are you going to switch and you're just going to say let's challenge Kyrie to do something off the dribble there. You want him to not shoot those shots. Well, he's not going to shoot them directly over Daniel Tice with his length. He's going to do something. He's going to make some dribble moves, and he's either going to fade away or he's going to try to blow by Daniel Tice, which is what what you would expect him to do. But in that tight spot there, right around the free throw line, with help getting by Tice is quick enough to at least push Kyrie out a little bit. And then there's going to be help coming over. What do the Celtics do to adjust and get Kyrie kind of playing just differently, not getting those easy little jump shots, not getting the same type of fairly clean looks that he's got? Push him into help, push him into a different spot, get him fading away a little bit, get him just against a couple of different looks. Maybe you blitz him a little bit off of those on those pick and rolls, and you worry about something behind, the help behind him. I
invite it. You want to have Tice try to push Kyrie further from the basket? I invite it. I invite that 7 days a week. There's nothing about that concerns me from a Kyrie Irving standpoint. He will fake to do the turn back away from you for his fadeaway.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he's going to fake back to the left, and then he's going to turn right back and wheel around him, going to the right and get to the cup. And you can talk now, and the value that Boston has, they have those guys that can help defensively on the backside of that. But that doesn't scare me. I mean, honestly, you talk about those the last sequence offensively for Brooklyn. Really, the detriment there was that Kyrie beat multiple coverages and then just didn't find the wide open shooter. He had Goran available there. It was to their detriment that Claxton's on the court and he kind of gets lost in no man's land in around the basket. And then they push that secondary defender over to Kevin Durant when it gets to him. But Kyrie had 3 opportunities in there to get a look for himself or to distribute it. I just think it's about crisper execution. It's funny. I mean, can I expect him to go for 50 in a game? You can set that bar. I loved everything about his game overall, and I think he can get better in certain areas, like setting other people up for success and making it a lot easier. That's the pivot here. I think if Kyrie is going to have to look over and see Kevin Durant still getting those physical matchups, okay. But I'm ready to go to Seth Curry. I'm ready to go to Bruce Brown, more slashing action in behind. If Tice wants to come out away from the basket, you need cutters going to the rim. That's going to come down to Claxton. It's going to come down to Bruce Brown. It's going to come down to Goran Dragic when he's out there on the floor. Certainly, like, that's what you need to see. And that's the supporting cast element that needs to step up here. Everybody needs to be that much more active to allow those opportunities, because if you go back to the first 2 scoring possessions for Brooklyn, they ran offensive actions like we hadn't seen the entire season. And it ended up with the ball in Andre Drummond's hand at the top of the key, waiting for double screens that got Seth Curry from the right corner all the way around back to the top of the key before he drove inside the arc and knocked it down. We talked about these plays. Like, they're there to be had. It's just about committing and being consistent with them. And I think that as much about Kyrie ties back into Kevin Durant. Play the balance game out the gate. Don't feel like you need to pop off and get yours, because that did feed into the blitzing and the physical presence. It was like, hey, we're low in a shot clock here. Where is the outlet? Where is the opportunity? The more you get everyone involved, is the easier it's going to be to feast later in the game for Kyrie and KD. I think that's the recipe here. It's just a matter of early execution, because the Nets didn't find their rhythm until basically the late third quarter, when they had to start forming that comeback.
All right, let's continue this conversation in just a second. There's a lot there. You hungry? You want a Built Bar?
I could use one.
What's your favorite?
Oh, I'm a cookies and cream, brother.
Cookies and cream? I like that one. I got salted caramel. I just got the email that peanut butter is back. Peanut butter is my favorite. Peanut butter and chocolate, man, is just the best. I could eat Reese's peanut butter cups like forever. But you know what those are? There's going to be like 240 calories in those things, tons of sugar, as delicious as they are. I'd rather get a peanut butter Built Bar because it's like 130, 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs. That's a much better nutritional profile and still really good. Chocolate, got my peanut butter, low calorie, high protein. And when I go hit the gym, I know that protein is going to help me when I'm, lifting. It's going to help feed my muscles and it's not going to blow out my cardio. But hey, look, maybe some people don't like cookies and cream. Maybe some people don't like peanut butter. They got a ton of other flavors. Like you got minty stuff, you got fruity stuff, you got these Built Puffs, which is protein infused marshmallows. They figure out how to put protein in a lot of different things there. So head on over to built.com, use promo code LOCK15. And the thing about LOCK15 is you use it every single time. Go try it. If you're thinking Adam is like, you know what? I like that cookies and cream idea.
Yeah.
LOCK15, 15% off. Go try it out. If you haven't tried the peanut butter ones, go check it out. LOCK15, 15% off. Figure out what you like, stock up later, use LOCK15, 15% off every single time at built.com. So
can I throw out one to you as far as Boston's adjustments?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to contextualize it around Seth Curry. My concern is that the ankle in a physical matchup is a little bit harder to manage than you might normally when you can get to your spots a little bit easier. Do you have concern around Seth Curry? How much attention do you expect or want Boston to pay to that, knowing how close this game was, knowing that he had a relatively quiet night after knocking down a few shots early? After Kyrie, after Kevin Durant, what's the next number one thing that Boston wants to take off the table here?
After Kyrie, I can't say that it's going to be any one particular guy because if you focus too much on one guy, you lose focus on the other guy. The whole point for Boston, yes, you don't want to really play with fire with Seth Curry because he's going to go off, right? So you're going to be careful of who you're helping off of. And that's a real discipline thing for the Celtics. You don't want to help too far off of Curry. You want to be able to get him, run him off the line. Here's, I think you want one stat, a Seth Curry stat that really stands out from this.
I'll take a Steph Curry stat if you
sure, yeah.
If we can have one, can we have one for a game?
Yeah, the 6 assists that Curry had in game 1,
yep,
unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. Because you know what that shows to me? That shows, yeah, you've done a great job. He's 1 of 4 from 3. He's 3 of 7 from the field. Not bad. I saw they still sagged off him a little too much. You got Daniel Tice again, getting him on a switch, playing too deep. You let him get those easy jumpers. You don't want to do that. But the play that really stands out to me, and Curry was a central part of this, early in the game, Al Horford gets the switch onto Kyrie, rides him all the way out to the right corner, then switches onto Curry. Curry drives all the way back around to the middle, and Horford is up and challenging him. And then here comes Daniel Tice stepping up, and Curry takes advantage of that, drops it down to Andre Drummond, who finishes the play. And that Horford is like yelling. He yells at Tice, don't help, like demonstrative. And Al's a quiet guy. So when he's yelling and wagging his finger in your face, you're like, sorry, Dad.
Something went wrong. I've made a huge mistake.
Yeah, it really is like your dad, like yelling about how you scratched his car with your bike pedal, and you're like, oh man. So not personal experience or anything like that. But yeah, those types of plays. So for the Celtics, it's recognition. It could be Curry on the floor. It could be Dragic on the floor. Kind of both treat them similar. It could be Patty Mills. Sure. Don't want to let them go crazy. You also want to stay in front. You don't want to help too much onto them either. And you just want to make sure you've got people in position to, when Kyrie has the ball and when KD has the ball, to just give them those different looks, make them think just for a split second and make everything just a tiny bit harder on them. So I don't have anything specific on Curry. I lump Curry and Brown and Dragic and those guys, and Patty, into the same kind of boats. Just
Yeah.
stay home. Don't go crazy. Don't lose your minds.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that's why, again, the overall theme keeps coming back to like, it's like how successful you can be. And I think the assists for Curry are obviously something you can hang your hat on. The problem for Brooklyn is you can have that stat line from him. You can even live with, not having a big scoring performance, but then you need somebody else. I mean, Dragic giving you 14 is nice, but if I see 6 assists from Curry, I probably want to see that, Bruce Brown has taken advantage and knocked down some open looks, maybe from the outside. He showed he's capable of doing that. The only other adjustment, because it's funny, we talk about adjustments. Again, it's just for the Nets, play better, more consistent basketball. It's not like Boston. Boston ran a shallow bench. You ended up going with Pritchard there for 8 minutes, but it's a 7-man rotation here, as you would expect it to be. The one that I've pointed to, though, from a defensive perspective, and there's still offensive value there. It's risky when you talk about a rookie player, but the Brooklyn Nets went out of their way to keep Kessler Edwards on this roster for the playoff run. He only played 4 minutes in this game. When I look inside of it, I see the minutes. We talk about Patty Mills. This is a difficult one for him. He's undersized no matter what, even more so in a matchup like this. And then if you're going to eat some minutes away from Andre Drummond potentially, I start to look in the direction where you can get some better defensive matchups, use some of that length on that end of the floor, because then get very switchable with Nicholas Claxton, certainly out on the perimeter. If you have Kevin Durant at the 4-5, however you want to stack these up, it's positionless basketball at this point. And then he can knock down some perimeter shots. He's incredibly limited when it comes to handling and dribbling the basketball. But if you combine him with a Dragic, with a Seth Curry, you have enough ball handlers and movement there. I think that there's a wrinkle. And again, I feel like we're both circling the same kind of statement of like, how much needs to change? I don't know. I probably want 48 more minutes of relatively the same type of basketball. We want to see better Kevin Durant. But outside of that, it's like you kind of got everything that you expected from this. Physical, big length from Boston. And then obviously just you need to see some better kind of secondary action off of the offensive sets for Brooklyn. And I know the fan base has been clamoring about what Steve Nash does or doesn't do in some of these spots. I'll ask you that. When you have superstars, and I know Tatum is one of those players, but his skill set and his style, I think, leans into more team-oriented basketball. Like Kevin Durant is going to kind of dictate terms on the offense. If he wants to come down and set himself up and take a guy on ISO, that's what it's going to be. There's not exactly a lot of these scenarios where Steve Nash, is going to step up and say, listen, fellas, you got to get that ball out of your hands, right? Like, and it doesn't mean that you can't run better actions and what the supporting players are doing around them. But I think that's the the devil's bargain you make when you get superstar talent. You live with the fact that Kyrie can go for 39 and can lift your team and bring you back from a 15-point deficit. And then, yeah, sometimes you're going to run into some ugly looking ISO sets. That's not something at the same clip that Boston suffers from, because they have, and you talked about it on the preview, a lot more balance, top to bottom. There's a lot of consistency in terms of skill set when you start to work your way down that order there. And that's what makes them a balanced team and what makes them a dangerous team. Everyone relatively can shoot. Everyone can be a bit of a ball handler. Everyone can be a facilitator when you go 1 through 4, basically. And listen, it's a good basketball team. It's why they are where they are. It's why they're the 2 seed. So it is what it is in that regard. It's just about, again, the Nets have been an up and down team. I think that's the funny thing. You're talking about Boston, that to me has been this in a good way, in a very positive way, just like, doing their thing once they start to get on that big surge and that run. And the Nets have been peaks and valleys. They have been absolutely electric one game and then really frustrating another. So if you're Brooklyn, man, if you're the fan base, you go, give me the electric in game number 2, and then we'll see what happens in game 3. Listen, nothing short of that. And then also, obviously, we're not going to talk about it, but Ben Simmons, now we know the rumors. It's up here. Come on now. It's all coming down the pike. I cannot stand that conversation in the slightest, because now apparently he's ready to go. He'll be back game 3.
Yeah. Here's a guy who's gone for, a year without playing basketball and is only just starting to play against other teammates. And he'll be ready to play playoff basketball in a few days. No problem.
It's fine.
So let me ask you, let's kind of put it this way. If there were some way to kind of dial in the universe and say, okay, we're going to get the exact same circumstances in game 2 with all the lessons that you've learned and the ability to make whatever adjustments that you want, but like basically the circumstances of the game, the fouls, the this, that, all of that stuff is going to be exactly the same. How do you think it goes for you?
I think Brooklyn takes game 2 if it plays out the same way, because I think even the individual adjustment from Kevin Durant, it's not just saying play better, make more shots. No, it's about attacking quicker, don't put yourself in that slow pace across half court where Boston is now set defensively and they've kind of pigeonholed you into. We're going to have our second blitzing defender. We're going to have ourselves ready to cover some of those backdoor feeds. Attack quicker, get downhill faster. He needs to get into the paint. Settled a lot from the outside and just barely inside the arc. Needs to get himself into that mid-range elbow jump shot, force some of the action there. And I think those fouls, you talk about fouls being the same, but Kevin Durant can do more than get to the line 5 times in a game. And I expect that to look differently. You start to see that action work, and then some of those things feed off it. He needs to play more balanced. If he's playing more balanced, I'll take the exact same game script and give me 85% of Kevin Durant instead of 65. And I think that gets them across the line.
I, of course, see things a little bit differently.
Are you still bullish on the Boston in 5? Like, does that after that first game, do you go,
Yeah. I still feel good about that. I mean, when I say Boston in 5, I think most people think, well, you think it's going to be an easy series. It could still be
5 1-point games,
very difficult games. Yeah. I just feel like Boston is better in the right places to win those tight games. And so when I sit there and I say dial everything in the exact same way, what do I get? Well, I think I see Jaylen Brown a little more dialed in himself. And he admitted, like, I got to be a little bit more present in a lot of these things. And you get
always like to hear that from your second best player.
Yeah, right. So you got to be a little more, if you get a little more dialed in Jaylen Brown, and then the beginning of that fourth quarter, if the Celtics so Brooklyn makes a little bit of a run, but if that was 7-2 instead of 15-2, then you bring Kevin Durant off the bench earlier, which taxes him a little bit more. He's playing 45 minutes instead of 41 minutes, and I think the cumulative effect starts to show itself. So I feel like if everything comes in the same way, and the Celtics just can fine tune some of the things in the game. If there's another third quarter the way Boston had their third quarter, I feel better about the beginning of the fourth quarter the next time around. And that 15-point lead, if they can get up to that 15-point lead, I feel better about it getting up to 20 versus going down to 2.
Well, listen, for all they're a very good defensive team, but for all those stats they came into the series with, they could not stymie a one-man led Brooklyn Nets team in a comeback there. So, and again,
right.
Should be frustrating. Probably, should be frustrating certainly from a Boston standpoint, and also probably tells you, but it's possible that we can clean that up. If you play those last 2 sequences on each end of the floor a dozen times, I think that it's marginal, but I think that Brooklyn wins those 2 possessions more often than not because they did a lot of things wrong defensively, which isn't their stalwart. They made a lot of errors there to afford Boston that opportunity. Offensively, they missed a lot of opportunities there and settled for a very difficult, highly contested 2-man defensive shot. You said, you still feel good about it in 5? I said it on the last episode over on our side. I go, I still feel good about Brooklyn in 6. I'm still feeling like that's the way to go because, again, the ultimate goal when you start a series on the road is to steal 1 game. So This is it. Steal the second game. You've done your job in that regard. But it is what is funny about 7-game series, man. You're hanging on every play and every second, and that first game ends, and you feel like it's indicative of everything until the next game tips off, and until that next game ends, and you go, well, now where are we? What looks different today than it did the other one? But man, I love it. It's good stuff, and we're no further to agreeing on how this is going to turn out.
No, we're exact same place where we started. We had people listen for 40 minutes to get nowhere.
You're welcome. And we'll do it again. We're going to do it again probably a couple more times before the series is over.
Absolutely. But that is the beauty of playoff basketball because who knows? I love the fact that 2 people can see the exact same game and come to completely different conclusions. We're just looking for different things. And so it's a lot of fun. So for all of you who are listening and watching from both teams, I hope you've enjoyed this crossover. We're going to continue these crossovers throughout the course of the series and the playoffs. So at least I'll continue doing the crossovers. Adam, you'll be kind of doing your postseason stuff.
Hilarious. This guy's good. He's funny. I'll be showing up on everyone. If in some bizarro world Brooklyn loses this series, I'll show up on every other Eastern Conference team's podcast. I'm hitting up King Pittman. I'm on the Bucks podcast, giving all the secrets away about how to take down Boston.
Yeah, just showing up. I'll be sitting there talking to him, and you just also the third box pops up like, "Hey, how are you?" Yeah, and
this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He does his podcast from an Arby's.
I am in an Arby's. I'm in the stock room. They let me decorate it. It's really nice.
I'm in my apartment, as you can tell.
Yes, you're very still unmoving apartment with the trees. Everything is just so calm there. It's wonderful. Beautiful. I mean, it's full of radiation, but it is what it is.
Source of my power.
Everybody listen, subscribe, all of that stuff. Catch our shows on YouTube. Share podcasts with your friends, whatever. And check us all out on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for listening, everybody, and watching.